All right, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us this morning or evening, depending on where you might be joining us from. We're really happy to have you here. So today kind of kickstarts our grad chat series that's really geared towards our either accepted students or those students that are really highly motivated to attend RIT. So we have a variety of sessions coming up over the next 2.5, 3 weeks. We'll have the session today with our faculty. Later this week, we'll be doing an Ask Me Anything session. That's really just a session for students that may have questions regarding anything from what life at RIT is like to application process questions, things like that. We'll also, in the next couple of weeks, have a current student panel. We'll also have a session for our folks that have interest in the career and co-op program and want to learn more about that. And then we will have an alumni session that we're kind of finalizing here towards the end of the month as well. So please keep an eye out for that information. You should be getting these details if you've been admitted and are or an active application with an RIT system. So we're very happy to have you here today. So my name is Matt Cornwell. So I recognize quite a few names here that are joining us today. So I work closely with our graduate students, incoming graduate student population. So today's session will really focus on hearing from our faculty. So things regarding, what our programs look like, what differentiates Saunders, some, highlights of the research endeavors that some of our faculty might be involved with. And then, of course, questions from you all. So please do not hesitate to ask any questions you may have. Please use that chat feature as well to ask any questions that you would like addressed. In the meantime, if our student attendees, if you don't mind just putting in the chat what program you are interested in or have been admitted to, or if you have multiple that you're thinking about, please go ahead and do that. That gives us a good sense of who's here today and who we're speaking with. But yeah, before we get started, I do just want to go around and have our faculty introduce themselves. So I think I'll start with you, if you don't mind jumping in.
Yeah. Hello, everybody. My name is Hao. I'm a finance professor. I'm also the director of the finance program. I'm happy to answer your question later. Thank you.
Thanks, Hao. Kevin, if you could go next.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kevin Sweeney. I'm an associate professor of supply chain management here at RIT, and I'm also the program director for the supply chain management program.
Thank you, Kevin. And Archana?
Hello, everyone. My name is Archana Jain. I'm the department chair for finance and accounting and also the program director for the accounting program.
And Rich?
Hi, everyone. My name is Rich DeJordi. I'm also the department chair for the management department and program director for our MS Time, Technology, Innovation, Management, and Entrepreneurship, and OLI, Organizational Leadership and Innovation programs.
Thanks, Rich. And Manlu?
Hello, my name is Manlu Liu. I'm the professor at Saunders College of Business, and I'm the program director of Master in Business Analytics.
Thanks, Manlu. Appreciate it. All right, and I see here we have some info from our students coming in with programs and interest there, so that's certainly helpful. So to get us started, I think we'll start kind of with some high level stuff regarding differentiators with not only Saunders and RIT, but also our program. So from a faculty perspective, How, I think I'll start with you. What do you feel differentiates Saunders and our graduate business programs?
Yeah, I think the most important thing for me, I feel we are fortunate business program in leading technology universities. We have a great computing college here. We have great school of mathematics here. So when we deliver our business courses, we always try to integrate technology into our courses. Let me use the finance courses as example. For example, we have a class called algorithm trading course. In that course, we use trading as the setting. Essentially, we teach students how to use Python download the real-time data from the website, how to analyze, clean the data, analyze data, and form your trading strategy. Throughout this whole process, you not only know how to do the trading automatically, but also you will be very good at Python programming. So I just want to say that I think our curriculum is very strong in terms of the space between the technology and business. Let me give you another example. Last fall semester, we just recruit a new colleague. Her research interest is AI. Therefore, next year, we will be able to offer a course called AI and Finance. So we try to prepare our students for today's finance market. That's a database driven, that's data driven, analytical based. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Hao. Appreciate it. Any others? Any of our other faculty want to jump in with that? Any other high-level differentiators that you'd like to mention?
I'll jump in a little bit, but the for the MS Time program in particular, but also our OLI program, we have a very good relationship across campus with like the College of Engineering or the College of Engineering Technology, and that allows us to work in a very applied sense. So in addition to sort of applying technology, in those programs, we're very, very focused on application and new ventures, things of that. We both, and to be clear, the entrepreneurship program is both what typically people think of as entrepreneurs, starting your own venture, but also innovation and entrepreneurship within organizations as well. So it's not necessarily about going off and starting your own business.
Kevin, did you have something else you wanted to add as well? Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So one of the things that differentiates RIT's program significantly, specifically in supply chain, but also I'm sure in all the other programs as well, is the heavy career emphasis. We have very, very strong ties to industry, both in the local and regional area of Rochester, Greater New York, and some of the other surrounding areas too. And that allows us to have strong relationships with companies and provide you with a pipeline directly into hopefully employment, and maybe in some cases through the co-op program, which I'm sure Matt may be able to tell you a little bit more about specifically a little bit later on. While that is generally geared more towards undergraduates, the graduate programs also take heavy advantage of those relationships and some of those opportunities as well.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. So that's a great segue. So I definitely want to hit on that as well, because RIT's, its fabric is the career outcomes that we offer, right? That is what we do and what we do really well. So I think the question I was posed, and we can take this a number of ways, examples of students and where they've gone from our faculty program directors. What are some examples of students where they've gone on to work and what they've ultimately been able to accomplish within their career trajectory? And Kevin, I'll throw it back to you if you want me to, because I know you have some examples just from our travels a couple of weeks ago, but we can start there and then go from there.
So examples of what exactly, Matt? I'm sorry, I'm a little unclear on what you're asking for. I apologize.
Career examples. So
okay, gotcha. I apologize.
And where they've
Yes.
gone on to work. Yep.
Yep, no problem. So we have people who have worked for a bunch of consulting companies here in the local area. I know, for example, that McKinsey & Company has a few of our GSCM supply chain graduates. That's both here in the United States as well as abroad in India. We also have some former graduates that are working for larger companies in the local area. For example, we have some people working for Corning, which is the glass company that manufactures glass for iPhones and Samsung phones in the United States and abroad. We also have people working for large retailers. Walmart as well as Amazon have hired some of our graduates. And we even have one student who went from our MS in Global Supply Chain Management program to a PhD program at the University of Arkansas. Because of the quality of the students that we've been able to turn out, we have had no problem in getting our students placed in really high-level careers at some very, very well-known companies. We also have had luck in placing students in companies that are a little bit smaller in scope, depending on if that's what you're interested in. So we have some people working for local regional health centers and other things like that in their supply chain to help them out. So really, there's a lot of opportunities for students depending on what it is that you want to get out of your career directly after graduation from the program.
Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate it. Any others that our faculty and program directors want to share?
I can share. So I look at the chat box. I see Jonathan Lozing, you are interested in the master in business analytics, right? So I would like to talk about the differentiator in two perspectives, and let me know if you have any specific questions, okay? So one differentiator is, how our MSBA program is different than the other MSBA programs. So there are lots of MSBA programs in the different universities. So one of the unique features of our MSBA program is we also offer the discipline-focused analytics courses. So if you look at our curriculum, so we offer the generic advanced business analytics courses for sure, but then we also offer the different discipline focused analytics, for example, focused in finance, accounting, or the marketing, operation management. So basically, no matter which area you come from, you actually can get the specific analytics skills applied in the specific domain. And another different I would like to talk about that actually is a question we often got from the students. Like, what is the difference between data science and business analytics? Okay, and the data science, lots of programs offered in the computer science related college or domain. Now, the main difference is in our business analytics program, you do not only learn about analytic skills, you also learn about it in the business setting, meaning any techniques or analytic skills you learn from the perspective is to solve the business problems. So then when you graduate, you actually can communicate with both sides of the teams in the company. You can communicate with the senior level management in the company. In the management business perspective, you are also going to communicate with the developer test team stage because you have the specific technique knowledge. So that's all I want to share, but please feel free to let me know if you have any specific questions.
Thanks, Manlu. Appreciate it. Any other comments regarding student success stories or outcomes that you all would like to highlight?
I'll say just a couple quick things. One, from our MS Time program, we have placed people in both established companies, but also have had some success with people starting up new companies or becoming entrepreneurs in that sense. So one of our members of our advisory board is now on the West Coast running a company that does customer feedback solicitation for clients and things of that nature. So we have both, and we have really good, there's a Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation, which is in the midst of being in a little bit of a transition towards really being a venture creation engine, an incubator, as it were, for the region, rather than as more of an educational part. Previously, it had done both, but we are pulling the education part more into the department, and the center itself is going to be focused much more on venture creation. So if that's interesting, that's part of it. The other thing I want to say about a differentiator about our programs is we at the college, we're a relatively small college inside the larger university. So we have the resources of a large technical university, but we have pretty good student to faculty ratios. So there's very established connections. For instance, Kevin is my department. Kevin knows every single supply chain student in the graduate program and their career aspirations and that kind of thing. I saw there was a question about tutoring, and I'll let someone from maybe Matt handle that one. But the reality is that there's a very, very good personal connection, especially in the graduate programs, between the faculty and the students. So we can establish that and sort of do that on a more one-on-one basis, personalized basis. So
I'll just add one last sort of maybe story. We do organize these traveling tiger trips. We started it last year, so this was our second year. We have done 4 so far, so 2 for accounting, 2 for finance. So the day looks like you go to 4 different companies or 3 different companies. We just went to Buffalo on Friday to 3 different companies, and we try to add like a mix of global national companies versus also regional companies. So for accounting, for example, we went to PwC, KPMG, and then we also went to Bonardio, which is a regional level firm, and then also EFPR the first year. And right after the trip, I heard that there were some connections built and follow-up happened, and then 5 students were hired by EFPR as a result of that trip last year. So we basically, again, provide opportunities for students to connect with the industry professionals in different ways. We'll talk about that more shortly, but just wanted to give you an example of just with that trip, we placed 5 students in one company that year. So.
Yeah, thank you, Archana. No, those are a lot of the things that we try to provide to students. And I think it's really important to be aware of those opportunities and be willing to jump in, even if potentially maybe it doesn't align super closely with your career track, but you can still network, right? And still build those connections. So I think it's important to be mindful of all those opportunities that come into place. We just had our career fair a couple weeks ago. The career fair itself brings a lot of employers to campus. I know Natasha's on the call as well. But yeah, so those opportunities are fantastic too, but we really, really try to provide those. And then our faculty are a great resource in helping build those connections as well. Somewhat along the lines of traveling tigers, and how I'll throw this to you first, because I know you advise the FMA club, but I don't know if you just want to speak to that kind of at a high level of what that club looks like, what that engagement opportunity looks like, and then get into other specifics, because there's a lot more to these clubs from a professional perspective that I think is really important to know and understand.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about that. So I think in every discipline, usually we have a club, right? So in finance, we have very active club. The club is called Financial Management Association Club, FMA Club. So within this club, the student actually get the opportunity to run a real portfolio. There's a real stock portfolio owned by the university, but run by the students. The portfolio has around $330,000 now. So students are trading actively in every semesters. If you are one of the club members, usually you will be able to make stock pitches. For example, you can recommend buy and recommend sell, but you need to make a presentation to the club members. So for example, if you want to buy a certain stock, you need to conduct a very thorough analysis, prepare a PowerPoint-based presentation to make a pitch, and then the entire club members will vote. If your pitch get approved, and then we will execute the trade. So throughout this procedure, you will gain the experience to do the stock analysis, real world stock analysis. And then if you become a little bit more senior, you will be promoted to the analyst or the portfolio manager level. That means you oversee the entire portfolio. You also run the analyst program. You assign different students to different analysts to cover different industry, right? So in this case, actually, you also gain some portfolio management experience. Think about that. You are just like as a student, you only are like a 22, 25 years old, right? You get the opportunity to run a $330,000 real portfolio, right? So this opportunity should be valuable, can be added to your resume, and should strengthen your resume, right? So that's one thing we do in the club. Second, of course, our club also always invite all kind of guest speakers from time to time. You get a lot of networking opportunity, as our colleague mentioned earlier. Third is our club member also actively participate into different kind of competition. Give you one example is the last year our student participate into the Bloomberg Global Trading Competition. I think there are around more than 3,000 team from more than 300 universities participate into this competition. Our team was the top teams, basically win the competition. I think this is actually shows that if you join our IIT, our program, not only you have good professors, you actually have very good peers to work with, right? We value this kind of interdisciplinary work because the winning team not only have finance students, we also have computing students, because finance industry now become more and more data driven and analytics based. So I can see more and more computer science students taking a finance minor now in my class. So we encourage students work with the computing student. You side by side work with them. You will get experience to work with the computing student even before you start your work. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Hal. Appreciate that. Any other highlights that folks want to provide regarding the student clubs, organizations that we offer within
So,
some?
Matt, I can add to that. So FMA Club, as Hao mentioned, is about investment and all, but we also have industry speakers come to that club. So we also have NGA, Next Generation of Accountant. And I think that's true for most of our disciplines. We all have a student club. And one thing that we do in those clubs is bring different industry speakers from different aspects of the business. For example, for accounting, we have the whole semester lined up for one with the public accounting, with auditing, one with tax, one with nonprofit, one with private accounting, and so on. So you get exposure to what does it feel like, or what does it look like working in those different aspects of the business for each of the fields. I think I can speak for all the clubs have that feature if you don't want us to repeat that same thing. So yeah.
The ASCM student organization here for supply chain management is a little bit different in that it's a student chapter of a larger professional organization. So ASCM is the largest nationwide, and I think maybe the second largest globally professional organization in supply chain management. So because we have a student chapter here on campus, that also gives us a direct line to the local Rochester ASCM chapter, which gives us direct conduits to industry professionals in a more direct and formalized way than maybe some of the other student clubs on campus have.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Thanks, Kevin. Yeah, we definitely do have some of those student chapters across disciplines as well. So that's a really good example of how we try and integrate that and again, give you access to folks that may be involved in that chapter from a professional perspective. We do have a business technology professionals club as well. All of these clubs are not just limited by discipline either. So I know you have many students in the finance club that are across disciplines. Business Technology Professionals Club is very intentionally interdisciplinary as well. One of our students started an AI club a couple of years ago, and it has over 400 students now. So, again, that's very, intentionally interdisciplinary. So these are all things as a graduate student, if you have the ability and the time that you can leverage and take advantage of while you're here. So at this point, definitely, and Gideon, we'll get to your question in just a couple minutes. But others that have questions, feel free to put those in now. I'm going to ask one more here, and then we'll jump into kind of the open Q&A session. But for our faculty, what is the kind of ideal student that you look for within your program? What are some of the key aspects that you are looking at for a student that is coming into your program? And I'll open that up. Anybody feel free to jump in.
I can start with that. So again, we want the students who want to learn and are ready to ask questions. And we don't need students who know everything already, obviously, otherwise what's the point, right? So we want students who really want to learn, engage, and do not hesitate when they're struggling to ask questions, and they're proactive and doing the work on time, keeping up with the class material, and are kind and respectful people. That's from my point of view. So
I'll say it's hard to answer that, especially in terms of the MS Time program, because that program is actually designed to take lots of different creative views of things rather than sort of have a cookie cutter. For the OLI program, the Organizational Leadership and Innovation Program, one of the things we're really interested in focusing that program on is helping you get your next job or getting promoted at whatever, in terms of people who are interested in moving on to other things. The other thing I would say is that across, I believe across all programs, and they'll jump in and correct me if there's any that this is not true for, is we are really looking for people who really are focused on the applied aspects of the disciplines. We're not, in general, I know we have placed people into PhD programs out of our programs, but that's not the main audience we're targeting to because we're such an experiential school. We have a much higher sort of focus on application of the material.
Yeah, maybe I can add a little bit here. So in finance program, of course, traditionally we receive a lot of applications from student with a finance business background, right? So for this group of students, if you are working hard, if you are curious about finance, our courses should be able to give you a good exposure about the advanced finance topic, particularly the topic between the finance and technology. Second is I would like to say that we also receive a lot of application from students from non-business majors. Give you some example. 2 years ago, we have a student is BS in mathematics. And then she joined here, become study of master in finance, and then later on she joined an investment company. Now she joined in more like a Albany, state of New York, some kind of budgeting office, find a budgeting office job there. So that's another good example is that our finance program is open to all majors. So basically, if you are interested in finance careers, we have a very flexible curriculum. Because we have 7 courses are elective, we can customize our entire program for your need and for your career goal. So basically, we are welcoming all the students from all majors. We have one program here, actually hospitality here. Dr. Jerry Xie is not here. So I also want to say something about her program. If I understand correctly, in her program, she also received a lot of application from non-hospitality program. So if you are thinking about change to a different career, like a finance or accounting, hospitality, or supply chain, right? So if you are not in this field, I think master program give you the opportunity to switch your career, to get into this new industry. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Hao. That's a really good point. We certainly see that with the MBA as well. Students that come in from the engineering, computing backgrounds, even the liberal arts and stuff like that, want to jump in. And inherently, that's what an MBA is about, right? It's that generalist kind of exposure to business. But in finance is another great example. You get that foundation early and can then gear it up towards what you want to kind of accomplish as well. So, great. So any last points we want on this one? Otherwise, we'll jump into any questions that students have. Okay. So Gideon, we'll start with your questions here. So first, is there a tutoring center for people like myself who are new to this field? We do have a tutoring center, and that does include a lot of the foundational graduate courses that we offer. So it's actually right upstairs on our 3rd floor in right between the old new side of the building. There's a space for students that are seeking tutoring. It's typically open about 6 to 7 hours, Monday through Friday, roughly. I think Monday through Thursday. I'm sorry, I don't think it's open Fridays. And if you have a specific request as well for a class that we may not specifically offer tutoring in, we'll field that as well. So we'll try and accommodate that. So we do have those opportunities and that availability. And then the second component, do you have any advice for us on how to prepare? I assume that means leading into the program. Is that right?
Yes, that is in general what I mean. I was also thinking about people who have accommodations. for testing and other types of accommodations like that. For example, extended time to take tests, for example.
Okay, gotcha. Okay. So for our faculty, any suggestions there on how to prepare the accommodation components, particularly at the graduate level? Any highlights there that you want to add?
Maybe I can offer one thought here. So if you are students, right? So before you join a program, I think what you need to do is that you need to fresh out a little bit foundational knowledge that could be useful, especially for some quantitative field. Yeah. Second is I think in the graduate program, a lot of work are team-based work, right? If you can further improve your public speaking skill, communication skill, that could be helpful too. Just some thoughts.
Yes, I think that's a great point, how especially because our programs, the vast majority are now STEM designated. So there is generally a quantitative element to most, if not all, of our programs. So we do like to see some students who have a little bit of math in their background, stats or algebra or things like that. So that's an important thing to be mindful of. If you don't have it, you would have been notified during the admissions process if you needed any preparatory courses or things like that. But even if you don't and you feel like you want to freshen up, feel free to do that. Reach out to us. We can get you that information on any of those courses that might be helpful in preparation. Kevin, go ahead.
Thank you so much.
In terms of accommodations, I know that there is a specific department here on campus, DSO, I believe, that helps a lot with the specific accommodations that you may need. And that applies not just to the undergraduates, but also the graduate students and every other student that we have here at RIT. Because of NTID, a lot of the faculty here are going to be very used to dealing with accommodations. So I don't think that you would run into any issues in trying to get your faculty on board with helping with regards to any accommodations that you might have. And those resources actually can help us maybe deal with some accommodation issues better than other institutions would be able to, because there's so much institutional knowledge around accommodations here.
Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate that.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Gideon. Appreciate those questions.
So
okay.
I see,
Sorry,
I was going to jump into Natasha's questions.
Yeah, I was just going to repeat it just for those that might watch later, because it's a really good question. So Natasha asks, I love the ability to apply concepts immediate while learning. Who would be the contact in Saunders for mentorship and questions that arise during the learning process?
That's a great question, and we'll follow on with the second one later. But in general, as I mentioned before, our programs are relatively small, so there's a lot of one-on-one interaction. So as you're going through any particular course, the faculty, especially for the graduate courses, tend to be very, very accessible and very involved. So Natasha, if you're taking something like the technology and the future of work as part of your program, then Muller, who you probably know for other reasons, would be the person. Also, because of this sort of very intimate program design, people will build sort of more strengthen relationships with certain professors, and all the professors are very interested in the success of the students. So, maybe you and Muller work very closely together, and in that course, and then next semester you're taking a different course, she would still, of course, be accessible to you and there to help you. And then as the program director and department chair, I'm always available to sort of oversee some of those things. But in reality, the professor for your course is your partner in sort of the learning of that course. And my experience, especially with the graduate students, is that they're very, very, very engaged with them.
Thanks. I appreciate that. And then I think this next question is very important for everyone as well. How do you / we create opportunities for connecting among grad students? especially with online programs and platforms, how can non-traditional students like myself connect with one another? I have some examples, but I'll defer to program directors first if there's others. I know Arch, and I know you've done a variety of things with students as well. How all of you. So yeah, so
Yeah,
if you
I can start with that. I mean, there are so many things that is happening to build the graduate community at Saunders. At the college level, we have this coffee hour with grad students every month, which is, again, any student can show up, faculty, staff, they all are there. There is slices with students for the entire college, which is undergrad both. So that's happening once a month. I do meet my students once a semester at least. Of course, I'm accessible all the time, but we did the pumpkin painting event, for example, in fall. We did a Diwali event, for example. We did, there is also, I think the college organized this Pets with Pies event around Thanksgiving. So there are a lot of different things happening throughout the college so building the community for grad students. We have been working really hard on it individually as program directors and as a college as a whole. We have, I don't know if you know Dr. Shal Khajanji. She is the Associate Dean for Grad Programs and Research. And this is a new position relatively about 3 years or so ago, or maybe more, 3 or 4. And she has done a lot of different things, again, to build the community. We meet as program director once a month to talk about especially some of these things and so on. So.
Thanks, Arch. Rich, anything else that you wanted to add?
Yeah, I want to say the OLI program is is completely online. It's not completely asynchronous, but it's largely asynchronous, and so that presents a different set of challenges. So we've tried a couple things with that. What has turned out to be the case, whether for good or bad, is that most of our OLI students do tend to be local. It was designed to be an online asynchronous course to attract, but it turns out that, of course, our RIT is most known and most appealing locally. So we've done things. So the end of last semester, not the end of last academic year, I forget, a little while ago, we tried to do a graduate student social for all the management department faculty. So that was supply chain, OLI, and the time program. And OLI was probably the best represented out of all of it. We invited everybody. We went to this local place, Loving Cup. And I think OLI, which is the online program, was the best represented. I think that that's probably indicative of the fact that they would like more connection. Mm-hmm. So we're looking at that as a long-term thing, how to make sure that we're building it. If the program turns out to be a very locally driven program, we'll probably build more synchronous and opportunities for in-person capability. It already exists. If you're here and you want to take one of your courses in person instead of online, it'll still count. You don't have to take it online. But we're going to build in a little more. You did not know that? I think that's what you just said. Sure, you can take it. You don't have to take it online. You can definitely take it in the regular course. So like sorry, they're getting very specific for those of you who aren't in this program, but many of you will have to take a course called MGMT 740. You could take that in person instead of online if you wanted to, because we offer it that way. Some of the courses that are very program specific are only offered online, so you can't take them in person because we don't offer them in person. So we're looking at that, and we're trying to, and we are definitely making the 740 available in an online synchronous mode as well, so that you have synchronous interaction with your fellow students, in addition to just completely asynchronous. That's all part of building community.
Yes, thank you, Rich. Thanks for that, and Archana, appreciate those insights. So a couple other questions here. I've applied for MS Information Technology and Analytics. So first thing there to clarify, that program is through GCCIS, so Golisano, the Golisano College. The Business Analytics program, and it's possible you're just confusing names because we do have a lot of analytics programs at RIT, but the Business Analytics program is the one specifically within Saunders. But how much is the student professor ratio for this program on campus? So speaking to the business analytics program and on the whole, I think our faculty to student ratio is like 12-1 at the university level. Does that sound right for my faculty? I think that's accurate. Class size is typically, and that's Mahir, I see you asked the typical class size. Generally, the biggest class you'll ever see at the grad level is 35 to 40 students, but a lot of them are smaller than that. On average, 20 to 25, and then some of the really specialized courses, even lower than that. So again, I think the benchmark at the university level is about 23-1 in terms of the typical class size. But RIT on the whole does a really good job of keeping class sizes manageable for our size, because we are a pretty large private university. So we do a pretty good job of managing those expectations in terms of class size. But yeah, anything else anybody wants to add with that? I think it's pretty straightforward, but in terms of class size or anything like that.
Just because we have people interested in innovation and entrepreneurship, we offer some of our classes also are very small, as Matt said, but also involve external coaching. So we have like an applied entrepreneurship class that is, generally relatively small, in the low double digits for the class. And then there's an instructor who's a serial entrepreneur and just an amazing person. And then we bring in coaches from all sorts of industry. A lot of them are retired, some of them are not retired, and they work individually with teams. So we try to build that personalized connection in that class. And that's not unique to just that particular class. It's just the one I have the most knowledge of.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I think all of our programs obviously have like a capstone element to them as well. So be mindful of that too, that you'll have some type of culminating experience that you can carry away with you and use, whether you're working full time or want something to, be able to show a company or organization or something like that. So that is a part of what we like to do, because the experiential piece, yes, you can elect to do a co-op, but we want to see that through in the classroom as well. And that's something that the curriculum does a good job with from that perspective. So any other questions that folks have that they would like addressed at this point? I think we've gotten through most of them, or all of them, I think. And then for our faculty and program directors, any other topics or anything else that you wanted to highlight specifically? I guess I don't want to open a can of worms, but I do want to ask this question because it's obviously coming up a lot and we hear it. The AI piece, right? So obviously RIT is very invested in AI and what that looks like. Can you all highlight kind of what you're thinking about from a programmatic standpoint and how AI may be infused in your curriculum? I know how you alluded to it a little bit earlier, but any thoughts there, high level pieces that you'd like to highlight there for our prospective students?
Yeah, maybe since I mentioned that briefly earlier, I can talk a little bit more, and then other program director can share their thoughts. So in finance, I personally feel that AI will have a significant influence on many jobs and many analysis. So the reason is finance is a data-based and analytic-driven field. AI can help us conduct a lot of analysis here. So give you one example is the Chinese AI model DeepSeek. Behind the DeepSeek, actually, the founders of the DeepSeek is also the founder of one of the most prestigious quantity-based hedge fund in China called High Flyer. So they have this hedge fund specifically specialized in applying machine learning and AI for trading, just like Rentech here. Right? So they realize that they have the capability to analyze data much better if they apply machine learning and AI tool. That's the reason they get into this space. Now, I think that's a perfect example is that as a finance professionals, we need to train next generation of finance professionals to embrace these changes. They need to be equipped with this kind of AI skills, machine learning skills. That's the reason in our curriculum, we will offer a new course called AI and Finance. So that should give students good exposure and help prepare them for the future job. In addition, we have several courses related to this issue. For example, financial analytics courses. In that class, we teach students R. And then some of the components actually do involve a little bit more like quant-based optimization and machine learning things. So students actually will get very good exposure in finance program. As I mentioned earlier, I think a finance program at RIT is slightly different from the traditional program. We really embrace the technology changes and then try to make sure these kind of new changes are incorporated into our curriculum and make sure we prepare students for today's analytic-based, data-driven finance industry. Yeah, thank you.
I'll jump in because I'm going to have to leave a couple minutes early. I have a slightly different view on this. Obviously, AI, from the management perspective, there's lots of opportunities that we know they're using it in things like HR, recruitment, filtering resumes and all. There's all sorts of things. And that leads to where it's probably the most relevant to the management domain, which is in terms of the ethics of it. So we also house the ethics component of it. So that's a very important concern to us. I'll let Kevin talk about how it might be used in supply chains because I'm sure it's got a lot in there. But it's a decision-making tool. And so my reaction, which is not typically the same when people ask me about, how are you using AI? I basically will say pretty much the same way we use the internet. It's a new technology that's a different kind of tool that's changing the way in which we do things. But it's still a background thing. Like the internet is now the basis for so much stuff that we're doing, but it hasn't. It has changed things, but it's not the focus of what we're doing in the management side. Now, obviously, in some of the other disciplines, that's not as true. So for us, we look at it. How do we understand what this is? How do we use it in the management of people? How do we use it in the management of innovation? How do we use this tool in the confines of the fact that it is a tool and not, so it seems to us, it seems much more revolutionary than the internet. But can you imagine how the internet felt to people who were born at the end of last century, at the end of the 19th century and saw it coming in? It's just as revolutionary for them. So I think I try to take that perspective in how we use it. We need to be understanding it, and also we need to encourage the development of skills in that area amongst our students. We can't sort of make it forbidden or anything like that because it is a tool. It would be like saying, okay, you can't use a calculator in school or you can't use the internet in school, things like that. That's just not feasible, and it's not going to be feasible to say you can't use AI. So we need to figure out how to help them understand it's a tool that we use in our various positions.
Thanks for the segue, Rich. This is something where you'll have a lot of different amounts of buy-in depending on the discipline. In supply chain management, it's been used extensively in terms of optimizing supply networks and internal operations, but it has been, let's say, less successful at helping people get a hold of their customer relationship management and kind of their demand side planning. So a lot of the curriculum that we have here in supply chain management at RIT is something that allows for and encourages the use of artificial intelligence as a input mechanism, but it doesn't really feature artificial intelligence as an outcome in of itself. Very similar to what Rich has described, artificial intelligence, at least majorly in supply chain management right now, is viewed as a tool more so as rather than a topic in of itself, I would say, is probably the way that I would phrase it. But I know that for other disciplines, that's going to be drastically different. And one of the things that I think helps us a lot here at RIT is that we have a lot of the understanding of the nuances of how directly useful artificial intelligence is perceived to be in some of these different fields right now, and how useful they may be as some of the different kinks and bugs and issues with using AI in the workplace kind of get hammered out over time.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Then we do have one last question here, which I think I can address most of this. Could you provide an overview of a typical course load for an MBA student? Additionally, if the student is participating in a co-op program, what would the expected workload in terms of hours, and how can a student effectively manage both the academic and co-op responsibilities? So generally speaking, for the MBA, the full time program is 48 credits, 16 courses. So generally you're taking 4 classes per semester as a full-time student. And then the co-op itself is typically taken standalone in most cases. So particularly as an international student, you have to have at least 2 semesters of study done in the fall and spring. You would then do the co-op in the summer, and then you'd finish the remainder of the program that following fall and spring term. So it would be a 2-year endeavor with a co-op over the summer. We like students to do that co-op standalone for a variety of reasons, so you can fully engage in that experience. You also don't have to pay tuition in that term, and you're making money. All of our co-ops are required to be paid, so that's another component. So it's typically a 3 to 4 month endeavor over that summer semester. It's possible in some cases to potentially extend that. Depends on the situation for the student, and it's case by case, but it's certainly manageable because we kind of have that plan in place for how you would incorporate it across, particularly a 2-year MBA. It's a fairly easy thing to do because you're generally here for that full 2-year window. But again, for all programs, the typical course sequence is we generally build around a 4-course plan, but it can depend by program. The full-time status from a federal perspective is 3 courses, so you could do 3 classes as well per term if that's easier for you and more manageable. And again, the co-op, generally speaking, across all programs comes into play in the summer term, although it's not exclusively in the summer. We certainly have some students that might do it in a different semester. But yeah, anything else that folks want to add there? All right, and thank you, Natasha. Appreciate that. And we definitely hope that the session itself has been helpful for everyone. And just know that we are available. So if you do have questions as things come up, please don't hesitate to reach out. I know all of you have my contact info. We can put you in touch with faculty, alumni, current students. Those types of things are definitely something that we're more than happy to do. And if you're local or semi-local and want to visit, let us know. We can certainly try and accommodate that as well. And we certainly are willing to do that. But yeah, so that will kind of close this first session for us. We hope to see you all in the coming days and weeks as we host some more sessions. But good luck to everybody, and we'll be in touch. Have a good day or evening wherever you might be joining us from.